This video will show you how to install your Ibexx Can-Am clutch kit. In your package, you will have a Helix cap, a secondary spring, a Helix adjustment tool, and then a small zippered pouch that will have your clutch flyweights, some stickers, bolts for your Helix, and some magnets for your clutch flyweights. And then there will be a card showing other great Ibexx products. There will also be a card with a link to the instructions online. Go here first to determine how you would like to set up your clutch kit. The tools required for this project are a T30 Torx, a T25 Torx, a 17mm socket, a 13mm socket, an 8mm socket, a 7mm socket, a flathead screwdriver, and a spring compression tool. Some optional tools that will make the job go much more quickly are the Ibexx Advanced Clutch Tool and the Ibexx Can-Am Secondary Clutch Tool. To remove the clutch cover, you will first need a 7mm socket for the hose clamp on the breather tube. Next, you will take a T30 Torx and remove the 11 bolts holding the clutch cover on. Then it may be necessary to take a small screwdriver to loosen the clutch cover so you're able to get your fingers between it and pull it out. Next, remove the clutch belt. We recommend using the Ibexx Can-Am Secondary Clutch Tool with the large bogey wheels to make this easier. Remove the secondary clutch using a 17mm socket. Place the secondary on the spring compression tool. Set the Helix adjustment tool from the Ibexx kit on top of the secondary. Now place the rest of the compression tool pieces on top of that and snug up the tool. Now flip the assembly over and remove the Helix bolts using a 13mm socket. Flip the assembly back over. Now, brace the Helix adjustment tool against your hip and rotate the secondary counterclockwise. This eases tension on the spring, allowing easier disassembly. Release the tension on the compression tool slowly until the secondary spring is no longer compressed. Now pull the stock Helix, spring, and plastic cup off. On each half of the secondary, there is a small arrow. Make sure those arrows are lined up with each other. Now place the Ibexx Helix onto the secondary, flip it over, and place the bolts that held the stock Helix in place back in and tighten them. Place the secondary back on your spring compression tool. Now install either the Ibexx spring or the stock spring, depending on the settings you want. Please refer to your instructions for the settings that you have selected. Do not reinstall the plastic cup. At this point, the two halves of the secondary will be apart on your spring compression tool. Pull the two halves together and make sure that the roller is on the ramped portion of the helix and not against the vertical portion of the helix. If it is against the vertical portion of the helix, chances are the arrows on the secondary halves are not aligned, and you will need to go back and check. Take your helix cap and find the hole that allows you to align the marking on the helix cap with the 0 on the helix. This will require a slight clockwise tension on the helix cap after it has been placed over the spring. Place the helix adjustment tool back on the secondary and put the spring compression tool back together. Once you have the spring in the right hole, you can now begin compressing the spring with the helix cap. Be gentle or you can damage your bushing. It should go down easily. If it does not go down easily, then back off, readjust, and try again. Once the secondary spring and the helix cap are almost completely compressed, take the new bolts from the Ibexx package and a 13mm socket and screw them into the helix cap and helix, but do not tighten all the way. Make sure the roller is on the correct side of the helix. Now, twist the helix adjustment tool clockwise, aligning the helix cap marking with the number on the helix as per your application found in the instructions. Then tighten the bolts down on the helix cap. Do not over-tighten the helix cap, as it can make future adjustment more difficult. You can now remove the secondary from the compression tool. On this secondary, you can see we have twisted the helix cap to be about 80 degrees from 0. Per the instructions, you will need to set up your clutch flyweights with the included magnets. If your application requires the use of the thinner magnets, only one of those can be placed into each hole, and it must be the first magnet to go in. Be sure the magnets are properly seated into each hole and that they are not at an angle. Also be sure that you put magnets into each flyweight and you do not forget a flyweight. Compress the primary clutch to provide access to the clutch flyweight. It is much easier to compress the primary if you have the Ibexx Advanced Collapse tool. You will now need a T25 Torx and an 8mm socket to remove the clutch flyweight bolt. Also remove the clutch flyweight and its washers. Be sure not to lose the washers. They are not needed for the Ibexx kit, but are necessary if you ever want to return the primary clutch to stock. You can remove and replace 2 weights at a time. Do not over-tighten the clutch flyweight bolt. The bolts will break very easily if they are over-tightened. Follow the torque specs according to the manufacturer. Now uncollapse the primary clutch. Rotate the clutch counterclockwise and install 2 more clutch flyweights until all 6 are installed. Reinstall the secondary clutch with a 17mm socket and torque it down to factory specs. Now you will want to reinstall the clutch belt. Reinstall the belt with the arrows of rotation pointing to the front of the vehicle as it sits on top of the clutches. If you can read the words, it is in the right direction. If you use the Ibexx Can-Am secondary tool, you will want to use the small bogey wheels on it this time. Using a T30 Torx and 7mm socket, reattach the clutch cover and breather tube.